Hey, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Just Two Dads with my co-host, my partner, Mr. Sean Francis. I am Brian Altunian. Today, we've got a phenomenal guest. So excited for you all to hear her story. Kate Swenson, founder of Finding Cooper's Voice and the author of Forever Boy. It's going to be a fascinating conversation. Hang on to your hats. It's going to be a blast here on Just Two Dads. Well, of course, if I played the clip, this is the part where going live is so much fun, Kate. Here we go, Just Two Dads. I'm gonna.
I love it. I love it.
On the early days of so first of all, we've done over 100 episodes of this. Every time we do this, we think, oh yeah, we've got this down. We know what we're doing. And our very first episodes, I think we had our guest on a phone and we were like trying to do speakerphone. And, Sean always says, we're like, is this thing on? Can you see? So we're like, oh yeah, no, we're so far past that. And at the same time, here we are. Hey, everybody, that shows you that this is live. We don't edit these. We go live because as families with children who have some sort of special needs or medically complex issue, things are live all the time, right? We live in the moment, we live in the now, and this podcast is no exception. So before we jump into our conversation with our special guest, I just want to thank everybody for catching us live on Facebook. Hopefully we're seeing it's not too choppy. I don't even know what it looks like at the moment, but if you're catching us after the fact on our YouTube channel, Just Two Dads, welcome. Please subscribe and share the content with folks that you think this would provide some value for. If you're catching us on podcasts, we love that you subscribe to whether you're getting it on Google Podcasts or Apple Podcasts. But sometimes we don't hear from folks who are hearing this in an audio format. So please reach out to us at wearejusttwodads@gmail.com. And finally, if you're hearing us in the U.S. Virgin Islands, the home of Mr. Sean Francis and his family, on WSTX AM radio, we welcome you as well and look forward to seeing you all one of these days, very soon. Before we get into this great conversation, I just want to say hello to my partner, Sean Francis. Sean, we've done 100 of these. 103 or 104? Actually, I don't even know how many episodes we do these.
I think we're at 104.
We're at 104 episodes. We started this about 2 years ago, this podcast 2 years ago. The work that we do in financial services, we've been reaching out to the special needs community because we are just two dads of children who have dealt with learning disabilities, autism, other things in the special needs community. And so our goal is to make sure that we shine a spotlight on those folks who are doing amazing things for the special needs community, and today is no exception. So we're going to get into our conversation with our guest, Kate Swenson, in just a second. Before we do that, Sean, my favorite question of the day. How you feeling today, buddy?
I am feeling great. I'm going to keep it real short. The first thing I want to do is give you reassurance that you might not have. I have my iPad on the Facebook page, and the stream itself looks normal. Although the feed through the service that we use for the broadcast, it looks like it's a day old, movements and everything. So don't worry about that. So literally, while you were talking, the logo was still up, and I didn't even hear the theme. And then 5 minutes after that, the end of the theme came in and said ding. And I was like, okay, all right. But everything looks fine. But
good. Well, and not only that, but I even turned off our background. So now it's back. So here we go.
Oh, okay. But I think it's a microcosm of the day. I made a post earlier where I talked about, I just got some stuff going on that are some challenges that we deal with as a family that, like anybody has. And I was thinking of it not from an ungrateful standpoint or, a complaining standpoint, but strategically in my head, how are we going to get through this? How am I going to figure this out? How am I going to figure that out? And I caught a whiff of some flowers as I was walking from my son's class, from Elijah's class, back to my car. And I was like, you know what? One day I'm not going to be here. Today I am. I can literally smell those flowers. And I sat there and closed my eyes and took it all in. And like, I'm taking these steps because I can walk. I can see. Let me be appreciative of that. And all of a sudden it kind of shifted my day. And then speaking of a shift, then you get in the car and you start thinking about the day and today's show and the fact that I'm so thankful for this platform and the people that we get to spend time with, and we meet fellow warriors and people, don't see themselves as warriors because we do what we do as parents. But I am here to say that our guest today is nothing short of a warrior, and I want to take the time to, with deep appreciation, welcome Kate Swenson. Kate, welcome.
Thanks for having me.
It's
Yay.
great to have you here. It's the way that we always get started is, like I said, you probably don't see yourself as a hero. You just do what you do. But if that happens to be the case, it's my job to let you know that you're lovingly wrong and that a hero, in fact, you are. And every hero has its origin, which is where our powers come from. So tell us a little bit about yours. And I know that you live in Minneapolis. I lived there for 10 years and love the area. Tell us about that, a little bit about yourself, because obviously how you were raised, where you were raised, and who you were raised by has an effect on how you deal with the challenges / opportunities that life gives you. So why don't we start with that?
Yeah, hi. Thanks for having me. Happy to be here. I live in Minnesota, married, 4 kids. My husband and I wanted to live a really simple life. We both went to college in very small towns, from small towns, got married, had visions of camping and boating and living the simple life, and had our first son, Cooper, and everything drastically changed overnight. I was used to babies. I was used to kids, and he was different than any baby I had ever met in my entire life. Did not sleep. And right away, really threw us for a loop and put some stresses on us. We felt it seriously from day one. Settled in nicely, and he ended up being not meeting some milestones, not meeting others, kind of confusing. Diagnosed with autism at age 3, and we had to move, which was a lot of stress on our family. We had to move to a bigger city to get services, and that put, again, stress on our family, stress on our marriage. Spoiler alert, my husband and I were actually divorced and remarried.
Wow.
Yep. And
okay, wait a minute. Hold on a second.
Yeah.
Okay, good. Okay. Wow, hold on. Let me get my popcorn. Wait a second. Hold on. My appreciation is just like running deep here. Okay.
Not use information.
Yeah, well, listen to you. So it was a spoiler alert, but go ahead and stay with the chronology because I want to get to that, and I want to thank you, and I want to just take my hat off to you because when you said that it put a strain on the marriage to begin with, I thought that's the real type of conversations that we need to have, and appreciate. Not just if you pray and work hard, you can get through it, but there's real problems that that we face. So I'm sorry. Please continue, and let's go ahead.
Yeah, so I have always, loved working. I have loved identify myself with my work. It's who I am. I worked my career in nonprofit and then PBS, the TV station. But it's hard to have a 2-parent household working when you have a child with special needs who can't go to daycare. You're getting phone calls from school. So that was one of the big stressors in the beginning. We played that game. I'm sure you guys have played. Whose job is more important today? Who's calling in sick, right? We actually just had it happen today with our baby. I was like, you're going. I'm like, no, you're going. And it's, it really made us who we are today. You talked a little bit about, where we come from. I came from an extremely positive mother. My mom is a ray of sunshine, a really hard worker. I feel like I am the same way. I am positive. I'm one of those annoyingly happy people. And I will say that I buckled under the pressure of my son's disability for a while. It really did take me to a different place because I didn't know how to help him and I didn't know how to make him happy. And I didn't know if he was happy. But like my book that I wrote, it really was a transformation for me and it got me to where I am today.
So hold on a second. So Cooper was 3 when he was diagnosed with autism. And you have 3 other children after that. So on the chronology, did you have more children before you and your husband split?
Yep. So when Cooper was 1, we got pregnant with our second son. Surprise! So big surprise, and which was a great thing because Cooper, although not speaking and struggling already, we didn't know it was autism. So we had none of that fear that can come with having another child, which you'll hear about. So we had 2 boys right away. After we got back together, we had 2 more kids. So our youngest are actually 3 and 1.
Okay.
Okay.
All right, good. And Cooper's how old now?
11, a 6th grader.
11.
Okay.
Okay. This
That's
is
what I was
good
going to
stuff.
ask you about the time frame in terms of what was available. And it's always interesting to find out what kind of services are or are not available in a given state. You mentioned that they were limited where you were before. Where were you living and then needing to move close to the metro area of the Twin Cities in order to get the services that you needed?
So we lived in northern Minnesota, and like I said, loved it. We fished, we hiked, we camped. It was really our identity. We loved being on the North Shore, right by Lake Superior, to kind of put it into context. And
Gotcha.
we actually drove to this bigger area 3 hours away to get his diagnosis after a 9-month wait. Of course, that's still happening today. Terrifying. And went back home, and there was nothing. It was like, good luck, bye. And we tried the school district, and they just couldn't accommodate him. So we made the decision. We're very lucky to be able to move. And there are autism service disparities. We all know that. Every state is different.
Right.
Minnesota's fantastic. But again, it varies by county, varies by area. So I transferred my job. My husband was self-employed, and I joke that we moved in the night. We were like, we're doing this, and we moved, and it was the best thing we ever did for Cooper.
Nice.
What kind of work?
What kind of work did you do before what you're currently doing?
Yeah, I was a project manager, and then I was in business development for a nonprofit. I think Sean's heard of it, Lutheran Social Service of Minnesota, the biggest nonprofit in Minnesota. Loved my job. Yep. And then went to PBS and did social media for one of their websites, which is kind of how I decided I wanted to do what I'm doing full time, because they were kind of similar careers.
Okay. And then what are you doing full time now?
Yeah. So
when I was pregnant with my 3rd son, went back to work to do business development for this website called Next Avenue. It's a website for a PBS for aging seniors. And I was, raising money and working with partners and influencing. And I'm like, I do that for Finding Cooper's Voice, like my own personal website. I work with Facebook. I do these things. So I took the leap of faith, and I do not have the entrepreneurial spirit. Like, I like my paycheck. Like, can I have that now? Can I health insurance? Mine. And I just took the leap of faith, and it was the best thing I ever did, because it led to my book, and it led to more time with my kids, and that sort of thing.
Good.
Awesome.
And the reason why I asked that is because I was gonna for those that are listening, if you're thinking of how do I get flexibility, how do I get some control? How am I there? How do I choose between purpose, paycheck, and or profit? There's something to be said for if you have the wherewithal to start a business or being self-employed, because as you mentioned, the question is always, who has the flexibility to call in sick today? Can you actually take him to this appointment or whatever the case might be? Those are things to think about. I think that's fantastic, and there's something to be said for having the nerve to step out on faith also.
Mm-hmm. It's hard on families. I talk to families every day where, mom or dad, doesn't matter which one, has a college degree or loves working or has a good job, but has to quit because we know Cooper was kicked out of daycare at 2 and we didn't know what we were going to do. It was terrifying. Like, what do you do?
Kicked out of daycare at 2. What do you mean? What, how did that come up?
So again, super rural area. So all the daycares were in home. Like here where we live now, we have center-based daycares, but we didn't have any there. And he couldn't walk in the line, and he couldn't sit at the table for snack, and he wasn't napping. He didn't sleep. I mean, he wouldn't do any of the activities, and they didn't want to deal with him. And it put a lot of stress. Yeah. And in full respect, Cooper was a challenging toddler. I mean, he's the love of my life, but he was a stinker. Yeah. So it was hard when you have 20 other kids.
Yeah,
and for sure.
Yeah. And that's, again, the importance of why we always talk about how it's important to ask more questions and make less statements so that you therefore make less judgment. But that goes both ways. That goes for obviously the person who is unfamiliar with a diagnosis, why a kid might be flapping arms or stimming or echolalia, or whatever the case might be. But that also goes for those of us who are very familiar with it and need to try and step into other people's shoes and try and educate them if they're willing to receive it, as opposed to us asking with the same disgruntled tone, like, why are you staring at me? Why is that not normal to you? And why we need to seek understanding and remain curious with each other in all phases, which is easier said than done, but very, very worth it. So at this point, he's, then out of daycare, you weren't sure what you were going to do. What was the next step?
Yeah, so like I mentioned, we moved down to the Twin Cities, which is about 3 hours away, and we really lucked out. We were able to get a day program. Here it's called day treatment, but what essentially it is a preschool for kids with autism. So they worked on sitting and having snack and playing and, communication, speech, OT. So he was able to attend that program during the day, and my husband and I could both work. We were so lucky. We were so thankful. And it helped him so much because they were able to focus on the things he needed, which were different than a neurotypical kid needs.
Right.
Sure.
Right.
And then how did you decide to make that transition professionally from what you were doing to what you're doing now?
Yeah. So when I was on maternity leave with my third son, I started working with Facebook. So they reached out to me and they're like, do you want to try video ads? Do you want to try a supporter page? And I was like, I'm on maternity leave. Sure, I'll give it a try. Let's work while we're home. And I did it. And when I went back to work, I'm like, I can't do two full-time jobs. And I would love to help families, support other parents, spread awareness about autism, help my son. So I leaped.
So that's it. Because I know we've all had conversations, so we kind of know your backstory. But for people who are hearing this for the first time, so Facebook didn't reach out to you just because you were just, Kate from Minnesota. They reached out to you because you had, am I right? You had Finding Cooper's Voice. You were starting to do stuff to support families. So tell us how that all kind of came about. You wanted that support.
So when Cooper was 2, he wasn't diagnosed yet, but he wasn't speaking, 0 words. And we knew we were doing the Googling at night and autism was coming up. And I started a blog back when blogging was super cool, when everyone had a blog. And I called it Finding Cooper's Voice because I really thought I was searching for my son's voice and we would find it and he would start talking and he would be fine. But I needed a place to pour out my heart. No one in my life could understand what we were going through, right? Not even my husband, not my parents. I knew no one like my son. So I started writing and it was super raw and no one read it. I mean, it was just like 6 people, read it. Flash forward to after diagnosis, I wanted more. I wanted to connect with other families. I thought I had the only child with a diagnosis of severe nonverbal autism. Like, where are the other kids that don't talk? I was really just looking for them and their families. So I created a Facebook page thinking, again, no one will ever follow me. We always think these things. And I had a bunch of things go viral right away. So Cooper was yelled at a special needs park by a man, and I recorded a video. So that went super viral. I submitted a video of him to the Today Show for a really cute contest of him saying mama with his speech device. And he won that, which was adorable. So these kind of little things went viral and grew a following, maybe to like 100,000 people, which to me was giant.
Huge.
Yeah.
Right.
And it really, kind of opened me up to awesome relationships and ways to help people, but then also scrutiny and kind of some of the dark sides of social media. And then that's when Facebook approached me. They're like, do you want to try some of these new tools? And I was like, let's do it.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So you talked, so you did the blog, but Finding Cooper's Voice today is obviously much more than that. What, tell us how that has all grown.
Yeah. So, I'm a Facebook page, which I'm just 50,000 people short of 1 million. Like, I'm so excited.
Oh my gosh.
That number to me just feels so fun to reach that number. And to think Cooper has touched 1 million people, autism, 1 million people that knew nothing, could have known nothing about autism, now know about him. That just blows my mind. And I try to share like little snippets of video of him using a speech device. I share beautiful stories. And I do that because when I went to the library 10 years ago and grabbed that book on autism, it was clinical. It was like no eye contact, flaps arms.
Right.
This isn't real life. This is not helping anybody. So I do that every day. I also have a supporter page that I launched so I could create this safe space, right? It's a much smaller group. It's more intimate. People can talk to me. They can ask questions. They can see my kids. And then I do events. So that's kind of my passion project. And that's in conjunction with my nonprofit. It's called the More Than Project. I'm trying to have an event every single month where I can rent out a movie theater and you can bring your kid and they can stim and roll. And I'll tell you, Cooper rolled down the aisle the whole entire movie. I rent out, water parks. I bring moms to restaurants. Isolation is so hard, and we don't have to do this alone. There's so many people going through this, right? Why are we alone? So I'm trying to create what I needed when Cooper was diagnosed.
Got it.
Gotcha.
Amazing.
That's everything. And isn't it funny how we become so convinced that, no one knows what I'm going through. Nobody else has experienced this. I am all alone. I just don't know. And that's why for the proverbial village, we need each other. We really need each other. And some of the people that we already know, we have people in common, but there's people we want to connect you with as well, that are like-minded. There's just a whole lot of difference to be made. And then for those that are looking on Facebook, we've got Pencils for Lucas.
That's one of my page. Yeah, she's an amazing mom.
Wow, that's fantastic. Again, we need each other. The biggest thing that anybody needs to know, special needs or otherwise, is just that you're seen or heard. So tell us specifically about the book and how that came to be, what it kind of consists of, and
I feel like I'm going to just grab this copy because I feel like it's much better if I just show it to you, and I should have it here.
Sure.
So it's right here. That shows you the kind of prepared author I am. Yeah. So I never wanted to be. First, let me say I love writing. I consider myself a writer. I don't consider myself a social media person or any of that stuff. I'm a writer.
I can relate to that.
I love bringing people into our life, and I love doing it in a really writing in a visual way. So that's what my blogs are essentially. And I describe Cooper, I think, in ways that just, help people understand. I talk about how he moves his hands, and I talk about, how he covers his ears, or just different things like that. And I had a follower who I loved and adored, and every live I did, she was like, "You should write a book. You should write a book. You should write a book." And I was like, "You're crazy. I don't have time to write a book." And long story short, she connected me with her agent friend who helped me get a publisher, Park Row Books. And here it is. And it's really our story from start to today. It touches, actually, let me just tell you something. I think this will really put it into perspective. I had a mom just reach out to me and say, I stopped reading autism books because it felt like every book the kid had to get better. And she's like, that wasn't our story. My son stayed the way he was throughout his life, and that's okay. And I didn't want to read a book and feel shame. And she's like, your book didn't do that. So Cooper has the same diagnosis from start to finish, but the person who changed was me and Dad and our family and how we talk about him and how we share him. And he thrived because of that. It's real. It's not sugar-coated or fake, if that makes sense.
Right. Absolutely. Let me ask you this, because we've gone back and go ahead, Brian.
Hold the question. Just don't forget it. I just want to say, for those who are seeing us live or seeing us on YouTube, we've put this the address on the screen and also in the chat. And if you're hearing us on podcasts or catching us on another outlet, come back and take a look at the comments under this video, where you can get linked to an Amazon link to the book Forever Boy by Kate Swenson, or just go on Amazon.com and look up Forever Boy to get that. So, because that's a fascinating concept, the idea that you're just sharing your story without trying to impose some sort of, something's going to change, life is going to get better, like he's going to. I mean, I think that's so real for so many families to know that our acceptance of this is our acceptance of this, right? Not our child has to change to fit our picture. Our picture changes to accommodate what's happening in the world. And I think that's fascinating. So Sean, go ahead. You can ask your question. But Kate, beautiful. I can't wait to read it myself. That sounds so beautiful.
Okay.
Awesome. Yeah, it's a question, but it's not developed into an observation and a question. And the observation, because, like, for instance, just as a parent, I'm generally an introverted person. but I went through a phase where just some of the, like, my wife is on social media and I'm on social media, but she's not on social media like I'm on social media, right? I'm just more active. And there were times when I posted, interactions and things like that my son would and I would do. And we went back and forth about how we felt about having him on video or his images and things like that available. And so the first observation I made is that I never thought about why I made any of those posts, but in terms of your description and then some of what I'm just feeling, not even what you said, is that a lot of that I realize now I was doing that kind of like for me. Like, you're posting it on one hand, your thought is, I'm going to hopefully make somebody's situation better, brighten their day, or give them some kind of connection, when the truth of the matter is, it's like you're looking for a certain amount of connection as well too. Even if you're blessed to have a partner at home that is, in lockstep with you, you can almost never have too many people that are like, yeah, I get that, I know what that's like, or someone whose situation is even more challenging and gives you a deeper appreciation for your own. So let me ask you, did you, have you and your husband always been on the same page? Have you had misgivings or caution about any of the posts that you would make, featuring Cooper?
Well, that's kind of a two-part question. So I'll say my husband and I have always been on the same page about Cooper, in the sense that he's wonderful and perfect, and we adore him and love him exactly how he is. But
Right.
After he was diagnosed, I felt the pressure to dive in and figure out the therapies fast. Like, we're on fire here. We're on a sinking ship. We got to figure this out. And I hear that from a lot of moms, where they feel this pressure.
I was just going to say, I don't know why that is, but moms tend to take the lead.
It's typically like they set this, what I hear is like this year of kindergarten. Like, let's get there. Let's get by 5, right? We're going to get there. Where my husband and I, so this is like probably the most favorite part of the book. There's a lot in our marriage and our divorce in here, but my joke about him is like, our house could be on fire and he would like sit down and be like, let's calm down. Let's take stock of like the piano first, obviously. Let's get that out.
Right.
He's super calm. It drove me insane. And I felt like I was in this race and he was like, calm down. Yeah. So what I learned, though, and here's a really good nugget of piece of advice for other couples, I think, is my husband didn't have enough skin in the game. Meaning, I was dealing with the county and Medicaid and the schools and the IEPs and every therapy center and making every appointment. And I would like give him a task, like he was like a kid, which sounds so funny. I'd be like, could you please call the insurance company? I'm like, and when they say no, say this. And then when they say this, you say this again. And then like later that evening, he'd be like, I'm like, did you figure it out? And he's like, no, they said no. I'm like, no. So I would be like, I can do everything. And that our shift of power was not. We needed to both equally be doing this. And when we reconciled and got back together, he took on a big chunk of like Cooper's, like, here we have waivers and all this sort of thing. And it is a nightmare. We're talking, you're faxing stuff. It's 2022 and like you're faxing paper documents.
Wow.
And every once in a while he's like, this sucks. I'm like, oh,
because it does.
Yeah. But it's funny. There's a unique pressure on couples that have a child with special needs. It's just different having 4 kids.
100%.
I will say that.
Yeah, that's why most marriages don't survive.
It's hard. Yeah. And the other thing I always touch on too is, and I do this when I do a lot of coaching to other parents, it's like, start having those conversations about forever. And the first 10 times you have them, you're going to fight. And one of you's going to cry, and one of you's going to be dramatic, and you're going to talk about retirement and guardianship and what, and one's going to say, but he's going to get better. And one's going to say, no, he's not. And I'm like, start those conversations. And on the 21st time, you're going to come together and you're going to get there. And, but it's a learning curve, right? And there's no therapist for this stuff. There's no, you can try and find a therapist. I'm looking for one right now. There's none. Like,
yeah. For sure.
Yeah.
For sure.
You
That's a lot
know
of
the
pressure on
therapist
families with 4 kids anyways, right? Just 4 typical kids. That's a lot of pressure.
Yeah.
Yep.
You knew who the therapists are. It's just like, Brian and I are crazy enough to think that, with few exceptions, the best financial professional to help a family get from point A to point B as far as financial services is someone that's either very uniquely, very familiar with the special needs community or a member of that community. The therapist that's going to be able to give the solutions, especially as it relates to the tasks and challenges that come with being a couple that has a child with special needs, is going to be a therapist that's been there. That's not like no one else can do a good job, but that person is going to be an exception. So for all of the challenges that we face as the special needs community, whatever that might be, whether it's the nutritionist, the therapist, whatever the case might be, we are in the best position to do that because nobody knows the path better than us. And for anyone that's thinking, go ahead.
Well, I always say you only know what you know, right? And so I recently had someone in my life a couple of years ago have cancer. And before that, I knew no one, right? So I remember when I would hear stories of cancer, I'd be like, oh, that's sad. Or like, however, the things that we say as people, we're like, yep.
Sure.
But once you're in it, you're like, this is awful. This is not fair. This is hard. So I think I try to give grace because it's like, you would never understand the autism life until you live the autism life.
Yeah.
Right. There's no way. And even within it, for all the things where we can look each other in the eye, it's like when you're out and about, you notice a parent, you notice a child, and you're like, you kind of nod and you just know. And you skip all the others, like you're like instantly best friends. Like it's like, yes, right. And I'll tell you the truth. It's like, I remember, my wife is Mexican American, right? So her sister's kids are the 4 kids that Brian was mentioning earlier that we adopted. And I don't remember who it was. One of them asked me, and they were like, they didn't want to offend me. And I was like, just go ahead and ask. And they're like, how come it seems like if a black person's out shopping someplace, you see like another black person, there's like a head gesture? Or now, is that a real thing? I heard a comedian say something about that. I was like, oh, that's real. That's quite real. And all it means is that I see you, especially if you're in a minority in a room, whether that room is a pharmacy or a grocery store. And the same thing happens when you're walking with your kid who might appear neurotypical at a moment, but you see somebody either in the middle of a meltdown or a twitch or something, and you look over and you just kind of like, and I got to the point where I evolved and I would even ask, I'm sorry, excuse me, is your child on the spectrum? And the response would be like, yes, oh my gosh. And you and you connect, obviously.
I have a really great story. I think it's in here. Just this amazing story. So our family, we like to boat still to this day. And when Cooper was in his hardest years, the second the boat would hit the dock, he would take off running, like just sprinting. And we'd have to have our shoes on. We'd have to be, holding really tight, and because it's safety. I mean, the kid can drown, whatever. Well, something was happening. We pulled into this marina, and I don't know if I was looking the wrong way. We hit the dock, and he was gone. And at the end of the dock was a busy road. So I took off running, no shoes, and I, like the true athlete I am, I dove and I caught him and I caught his foot. So we were laid out long, right? And this woman walks by me and she bends down, like squats down and touches my shoulder. She's like, my son's autistic too. You're doing a great job.
Oh my God.
I was like, it touched me so much. It's in my book because I cried so hard. I was like,
yeah.
She sees me. Oh my gosh, she sees me. Like she gets it, right?
And you didn't even know you needed it. You had no idea. You were fine till she said that, right?
Fine. And then I sobbed. Because it can be so lonely. You can be in a crowded room of people and have the one child with special needs and be so lonely.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it can get lonely when things are set. I remember we were at downtown Disney once, and Elijah was starting to get kind of tall. It was probably the last couple of years that he was in a stroller. And I remember we were walking, and I was the only one in the family that heard these 2 girls walk by, and one said to the other, not even the least bit discreet. She's like, he is too big to be in that damn stroller.
Yep, you've been there.
And everybody else in the family didn't hear her, but they heard me. And I was like, and you too damn old to be that ignorant. But I said it under my breath. I never have the right thing to say. I think of it later. That's good.
Well,
I had it at the moment, but I know that I want to see people and understand them as much as I want to be seen and understood. And Brian, I'll tell you, that's who I strive to be. But if I had delivered that and I was not met with understanding and I was met with the same, I would have been on the news. I would have really let the words fly at that point, and it wouldn't have served any good. So I just kind of, but of course I spent more time thinking about that, and I hate to admit it, but it kind of like, it stings a little now just thinking about that. Like, and it's a matter of how it's said. So, or I've even told my wife, I've said to people, you know what, it's okay to stare, but you should at least either blink or come up and ask a question, but don't just stand there and stare at us. Don't just stare at us. I've done that once or twice and had somebody go, and what they do is they stare twice as hard and kind of back up and just like, oh, I wasn't looking at you. No, I just.
Yeah. When I was super angry, I had some angry years, which were really hard for me because I'm a positive person, but I had some angry years. And I remember I would be at Target and Cooper would be like standing in the cart, like, cause he wouldn't walk, but he would rock the cart and he'd sweep the shelves with his hands. And I remember I would have to get milk, right? Or I had to get diapers, or I had to get something. And I would be going so fast, sweat dripping in my face. And I would be like looking at people, just combative. Like I would almost be asking for something because I wanted to fight. I am no way like that anymore. And I get asked this a lot. Like I always say, you have this armor that like somehow grows after a certain amount of time, and you just kind of deflect and like you just protect your child and you focus on them, and it changes. I'm not saying I'm a saint by any means, but I don't have that anger anymore. But because that anger is heavy, and it's really it's really hard to carry.
It's palpable. It's a living, breathing thing. And I know when I had lost a handful of mine because, when Elijah was small and he's kind of making, getting squirrely and making noise, my wife could take him wherever, as far as the store goes. When it got to the point when he's a little bigger, it would have to be either me or both of us. And when he'd have a meltdown, especially a place like Costco, which is like, a big, huge warehouse, I was conscious. I like to say that I'd like to try and think that I don't care what other people think, but if people are looking and I'm looking around, and one day we were in there, we got to the register, it was like hundreds of dollars worth of groceries and stuff, and he's just like losing it at the register, and I'm trying to figure out, am I going to walk out of here and leave the cart and just come back in? And he's calming down, and I'm able to pay, and it's really busy in there. This lady came up to me, she got really close to me, she just says, "You are so patient." And my first thought was like, who? Me? I know you're not talking about me, because I just felt anything but patient. I was like, you should see my wife. She's patient. I'm not patient. And then I realized two things. I should give myself a little more credit than I thought, which is what we should always do. And then the other thing is I was oblivious to everyone around me staring, or everyone around me, period, with the exception of the cash register, the cashier, excuse me, and that lady, once she said what she did. And that's how I, at that point, knew that I had evolved. So for anybody listening, if you're still in that angry phase, if you're in that scared phase or that hurt phase, whatever phase that comes about by giving two craps what somebody around you says, one, it's okay, and two, it doesn't have to last, and you got to allow yourself to get through it.
Yeah.
I think it's healthy to go through it.
I agree.
It's necessary.
It's a release.
It's necessary.
It's a release. Yeah, and it's part of the phases of dealing with your situation, whatever that is, right? The whole denial, grief, anger, all of that stuff. Because in a way, and we've talked about this on our podcast too, it's all the same issues that we do when we lose somebody, if somebody passes. But in a way, once our image of what we thought our child's childhood and life would be, and it ends, and we come to the realization that their life is going to look different than what we thought, it's as if that has died, right? As if our image of what our child was what their life was going to look like has died. So we go through all those same passages of emotions that it does when somebody does pass away. So you do have those, the denial, the anger, the grief, the sadness, like all of those things are bargaining. Yeah, 100%. 100%. God, please just let him get to this stage here, and then I promise you, whatever. I'll double my tithing, like whatever it is, right? Yeah. Give me that. I was going to ask you.
The difference is, okay. On that vein, really quickly. Yeah. But the difference is that you can't talk openly about special needs parenting grief. And when I learned about this, so I have a friend who's a writer, she's a widow. Her husband died of cancer, and she has a son with significant special needs. Remarried to another widow. They have like 9 kids together. She's like the salt of the earth. Amazing. But my point is, she talks about how she can openly talk about grieving during the cancer situation, her husband dying and all this stuff, but she can't talk about how her son will never speak, never live independently, how she's sad because in a way, sometimes the world views like she doesn't love him or she's failing him. And she's like, I don't get that. And I think that's an important thing to touch on. It's like, you can say, moms and dads, you can say this is hard. You're going through something really hard. And it doesn't mean you love your child any less. You probably love them more. Like, it's just hard.
Yep.
It's different. Your love expands because you're now capable of doing something that you didn't prepare for. You didn't know you were capable of doing, and now it's a completely different level. By the way, we talk about this on this podcast frequently with parents. Like, it's okay to talk about the grief of the loss of the idea of what you thought your life was going to look like, what your marriage was going to look like, what your relationship was going to look like, what your child's life is going to look like, because it is part of it is the reality. And Sean and I, as dads, men don't talk about this stuff enough either, and so we consciously talk about this stuff on our podcast because we want people to know, like, it's okay. It's okay to feel what you're feeling and to experience the grief and to experience it. A, B, share with other people because it frees other people to gives them the freedom to feel that and process those as well. So absolutely,
and it's not only okay. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Brian. You weren't.
No. Go ahead. Finish this line.
Yeah. I was going to say it's not only okay. It is essential to grieve the loss of a life that didn't get the chance to really exist. It's essential to grieve the loss of a child that doesn't exist and is now in exchange for the one that you have versus the one that you thought was going to be. Because what happens is, if you carry the disappointment with you, as opposed to grieving, you have less to give to the actual life and child that you have. And then you run the risk of missing out on what we talked about, which is, I didn't know that I could care this much this way. There's more of you that's needed, quite frankly, and you have less to give if you're resisting the grief.
Do you know what's said to mothers? So, what's said to mothers all the time? I don't get it much anymore, knock on wood, now I will. But you got pregnant, you should have known this could happen. You should have known. And I always talk about the Disney of pregnancy. I was frolicking to my baby showers. I never knew I could have a child with special needs. I took my prenatals and I exercised, and I didn't know any of this could happen. So it's so shameful to put that on a parent. I didn't know this was going to happen.
For sure.
That's idiotic. Because I was sitting there silent because I was trying to think who says that?
Yeah, people who've never been through it. But I was gonna say, I remember when my daughter Jordan was diagnosed, and Jordan comments a lot. She's one of our constant viewers. That's Joe Quinones. That's my daughter Jordan. When she was diagnosed, what I noticed immediately for me and about me was that I started becoming very present to her development and in just being present to the things that she did. And I noticed that before the diagnosis, I thought I was present, but I really wasn't that. I wasn't that present because clearly I was looking at her through a whole new set of eyes. And so, for me, just that simple transition was an awareness that I had no concept about. One of the questions I was going to ask you is, tell me about family and your support while you were going through it. The kind of support that you got. Did you have family close by? Did you have a support group? I mean, know that you had others, peers and whatnot, and you've developed a support group. But when you were going through it initially, did you have support from friends and family?
Nope. So, wonderful parents. Me and my husband both have wonderful parents. But no, we lived about 3 hours away from our closest family member was 3 hours away. So that was hard because you don't just call a babysitter. That's taken us still 11 years to try and figure that out. So that was hard. But no, we did not have any local support. My mom worked her career in the school district. So she would say things like lovingly, well, she's like, I know autism. And, she was imagining the most severest case of autism ever, because that's what she, had seen in her lifetime. She knew what she knew. Right. And she's like, that's not Cooper. That's not possibly Cooper, And she would say things to me like, you'll talk, Katie. Everybody talks. That's what she'd always say to me. And finally, one time I just lost it on her and I was like, no, Mom, they don't. Everybody, and I didn't know that either, but it's like, everybody doesn't talk. Just stop.
Yeah.
Jamie's parents were even a little bit more behind, still very supportive, but they thought, I think the struggle is everyone kind of thought he was going to grow out of it. Like once he starts talking, he's going to be fine. Once we get him in kindergarten, he's going to be fine. No one really knew, including myself, how significantly affected he was going to be. That to me was harder than the diagnosis itself, is watching all these children with autism in the autism preschool and then 95% of them starting to talk and move on. And for a lot of years, Cooper really stayed in that hard place. He didn't start having breakthroughs till he was 8. So that to me was harder than the diagnosis. And I think our family is 100% on the same page right now. Cooper is treasured and loved. But we had hard years.
Yeah. I want to ask you this, and I know we're getting close to the end, so we have a couple things that we definitely want to cover before we go. But I just ask you, can you talk a little bit about your foundation and kind of what your goals are for your foundation?
Yep. So my friend Amanda and I launched it during COVID. I wrote a book, had a baby, and launched a nonprofit, as most do during.
Yeah. That's what everybody does during the pandemic, right?
Yes. I did not get a puppy.
That you then returned after COVID.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay. Got it.
It's called the More Than Project, and where it started from is during COVID. We took an isolated group of people, right, and made them even more isolated. Took away what little services and support they had. And suddenly moms were reaching out to me on a daily basis and saying, I can't do this anymore. I'm on my bathroom floor. My child hasn't slept for 72 hours. No one's coming. There's no therapy. So what Amanda and I did is we raised a bunch of money and we provided free mental health counseling to caregivers. And we were able to provide it virtually, bring it right to them. We even set up the appointments. We did everything for them. It was wonderful. Then when COVID ended or the restrictions were lifted, you had to only counsel within your state. So it got way more complicated. During COVID, counselors could counsel like anywhere because of the Zoom. So that kind of slowed that down a little bit. So then we did a project called More Than a Teacher, where we picked 3 teachers to provide sensory classrooms to. We found out that there are teachers that don't even have swings, that don't even have fidgets for their kids, that they have to buy them themselves. So we picked 3 teachers to spoil. And then we honored some siblings, children born into advocacy, the tiniest advocates that don't always understand. And we gave them some really fun stuff and spoiled them. And now we're doing a retreat. It's actually next weekend. We're bringing 100 moms to a camp in Wisconsin. And we're going to, the shtick is they can either participate or they can sleep. I think that's the we're going to sleep. But basically, we're raising money and we're giving it 100% back. We have no overhead costs right now. So 100% of it's going back. And we're just trying to help families that are lonely and scared and the people that help our kids.
That's amazing.
Yeah, we're having
First
fun.
of all, I think that is amazing. And the other thing I was going to say is Sean and I just got news recently that a friend and a guest on our show has a foundation and that does a lot of stuff internationally. He's going to start to do a domestic arm, and it's going to be around, again, it's a pretty significant foundation, an arm around autism. So we're going to make a connection for you for sure with that organization. Oh, cool. It's the All for One organization and their plans and moving forward, because I think supporting that kind of a project would be fascinating. So just know that our goals are here. Our goals here with Just Two Dads was to create a platform to shine the light on people such as yourselves that are doing great things for the community, and then also to create a network of folks so that we can all, help further each other's efforts and goals. We got to get you to 1 million followers on Facebook. That's one thing we'd love to do. And as we get,
don't you feel like we're all in a vacuum? So I just had a foundation reach out to me. They're like 10 miles away from me. Never heard of them. It's like. Yeah. The autism world is weird. Like, it's like we only know what we know in here. And
yeah. It's true.
A lot.
It's true.
So Sean, this is and Kate, this is this is a part of our podcast where Sean asks a question. This is sort of a parting shot, if you will, to some degree. Sean, go ahead and ask Kate the question.
Well, this is the portion of the show where we will ask the following. Our ability to change the world. is tied in some way, great or small, to our ability or willingness to change ourselves. So with that said, can you give us one example of a thought or belief or philosophy that you once held very, very dearly and believed strongly that you no longer believe to be true?
Mm-hmm. So when my son was diagnosed, I got divorced, had 2 kids, worked full time. And when the day ended at 3:30 p.m. on a Friday, I couldn't leave the house again till 8 a.m. on Sunday or on Monday morning because my son, his needs were that significant. If we needed milk, we had to go through the drive-through to McDonald's. My son would hurt his brother, hurt me. He broke lamps, he stripped beds. We couldn't have the lights on. All the hard parts of autism that are often hidden away. I thought my belief was I was not meant to be happy and that I was going to be sad for the rest of my life. And I thought I will just live a little bit broken and that's fine. And I will pour myself and it will just be me and Cooper. And my husband left and my other child will eventually leave and I will be alone and no one will ever see me or ever know. What a load of baloney. I was super depressed and I was a caregiver in crisis, which is what I talk a lot about. And there's a lot of moms, just so you know, that are feeling this exact same way. And you would have no idea because they put makeup on and they get dressed and they go to work and they smile. But I really, truly thought that I was meant to be sad for the rest of my life. Wow. So when I share that now in my presentations, people are like, no way. And I was like, no. I was heartbroken. I thought I was going to be sad for the rest of my life.
Wow. And you were no longer that.
No. But it was me that had to change. It was me. I think of that anger as a suitcase. I had to set it down and I had to, I had a choice. I could look at this one way or the other, and Cooper is going to have a fantastic life. And you can have a fantastic life without a big job and a big salary. You don't have to drive a car or get married. He is going to have an amazing life. He's touched 1 million people. Look at him. Just by being himself, he showed the world that you can communicate with a speech device. You can love penguins and trains and whales and all these things at 11. You don't have to be into fancy stuff or, he's so amazing and he's just himself. Like we can all learn from that.
For sure. That's beautiful.
That means a lot too, because I sit and I wonder, I'm like, will Elijah drive a car? Will Elijah want to drive a car? Will Elijah fall in love? Will he get married? All those things you wonder. And when you just mentioned, that doesn't have to take place, it's not a matter of settling either. It's just that it doesn't have to take place, and maybe it will happen, maybe it won't. But we can't let it get. And I'm not speaking French when I say we. We can't let it get in the way of making the most out of the days that are in front of us. Each and every one. So thank you.
I was missing his life. Like I was missing his life, waiting for him to talk and waiting for him to do these things. And I remember I had this moment where I looked at him, and I can't remember if he was 6 or 7 or 8 or however old he was. And I looked at him and I was like, where have the years gone? Like I'm going to enjoy you. I am going to celebrate you exactly and meet you where you're at. And it changed our whole life.
For sure. Yeah. And it makes it easier for you to make sure that anyone else that comes into his space, they need to be prepared to do one of 2 things, either the same thing, or as Martin Lawrence used to say, get to stepping. Yeah. That is it.
Well, it's been an amazing conversation, Kate. I'm so grateful that you were able to spend this time with us and with the folks that were watching. For everybody who was catching us live on Facebook, thank you for giving us the time and for commenting as you did, and for listening to Kate and what Kate's all about. Please look at her website, findingcoopersvoice.com. Go to Amazon and buy her book, Forever Boy. By the way, just to be clear, Kate doesn't pay a promotional fee to be on our show. We don't get paid for promoting anything. We're not doing this as a promotional vehicle. We do it because out of our love for this community and the moms and the caregivers in crisis. I love that term. It hits right in the heart. That we do this because we want people to know that there are absolutely amazing warriors in the world taking care of our children and our families and other folks who are going through the same thing that we're all going through. So, Kate, thank you so much for being on the show today. It was really great.
Thanks for having me.
Thank
And
you.
as we sign off, I'll sorry, Sean. I'll let you say thank you in a second. Sean and I fight for screen time because we don't get enough of it. I don't know. I don't know. I always say at the end of every show, empathy and love are the two things that I pray for more of. As you were talking about, when you see somebody in a grocery store and somebody struggling with a child and running across and leaping and catching the child by the ankles, have some empathy. You don't know what the other person's going through. You don't know what challenges they're facing and what struggles they've been through. You don't. So have some empathy. Ask questions. Be curious before you make a judgment, because that's enough to help make the world a better place. And finally, see the world through the lenses of love. If you look at the world isn't it amazing that when you fall in love, how the world looks different, smells different, sounds different, everything is different. We should all be walking around looking at the world through the lenses of love. It just makes the world a better place. So thank you again for being on the show. Thank you to all of our listeners on the Google, Apple podcasts everywhere, WSTX AM radio. Thank you folks for participating. And for those of you catching us live on Facebook, again, appreciate you and your comments. And YouTube subscribers, please subscribe, share this information. We need more people to follow folks like Kate, get her book, hear the story, support the foundation, and support other families in the special needs community. With that, I'm going to throw it over to you, Sean, to just send us off.
Kate, is there a website for the More Than Project? I don't know if we had that on the chat.
It's just part of my website. So if you go to my website, findingcoopersvoice.com, click foundation.
Okay, excellent. I want to thank you again for the time that you spent here with us. I almost feel like it's almost kind of unfair. We do this thing and we have this show and we just, get so much out of it. It's such a labor of love. But I want to, as always, thank everyone for tuning in. Just as Brian mentioned, please like, share, and subscribe on the YouTube channel. And I want to again mention our commitment to help improve the lives of 1,000 families over the next 12 months in the special needs community. And I want to, as always, thank the women in my life without whom I would not be. That is my amazing wife, Laura, my mom, Jan. And remember, again, questions are much more powerful than statements. Let's remain childlike and not childish. Try and be more curious about each other and less judgmental. Everybody wants to be seen, heard, and loved. And wherever you are, if you're watching this and you're within the sound of this voice, we love you. Thank you.
Thank you, Kate. See you, everybody. I know. It's the end of our broadcast, everybody. Go home.